All right, how's it going, everyone? So we're back, and if I select everything here and I turn on our checker map, we can see that everything's UV'd and properly laid out. So this is pretty cool. We're not quite ready to sort of start baking with this asset. As you can see, everything's put into its proper groups. Everything's straightened out as nicely as it can be. The sizing ratio is very good. It's one thing I didn't fully explain in the last part, but we want all these checker boxes across the entire model to be the same size. This is, of course, it's referred to textile density. So if you're not too familiar with this, I'd recommend looking into it a little bit more. But there are tools that we have and plugins that we have to sort of get this going. But it's also when you do project something, the options will appear on the right side to sort of do that. So if you want to do it as you sort of go along, that's an option. But we want the checkers to just be one way or another the same size. You can rescale it in the UV editor in post. But anyway, so everything's UV'd and we just have to lay it out. But as I was kind of going through that, I came to the realization that this is a very, very dense mesh. As we can see, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And kind of the way that I want to go about this is to have two different texture sets. So we're going to be baking twice. We're going to have two sort of batches of exports. So we're going to have two normal maps, two albedos, and so on and so on. And to kind of explain how this is going to work a little bit and why I chose to do this, I'm just going to quickly open up Photoshop in the background, and then it'll hopefully be a little bit more clear as to why we can do this, because you always have the option to increase the texture resolution, but at a certain point it becomes a little bit more reasonable to just have multiple texture maps. It is very case dependent. I'll open this up and kind of explain it as best as I can here. So if we go to File, Photoshop's always slow when I open it up. File, New. Let's just do 1000 by 1000. So let's say this is our standard. Let me just draw this out. Rectangle. Let's use shape. So let's say that this is our standard 2K texture, right? Let's just draw on this. So this is our standard 2K texture. When you think of how can we increase our resolution, you might immediately think, okay, let's just make the next one, or let's just bump up the size to 4K, right? Because that's the most reasonable thing to do. It's twice the size, or so you may think. 4K is not times 2. The reason that is because if we have a 4K map, what it essentially is 4 2K maps, right? We are doubling the size all the way around. And this might seem self-explanatory, but I remember the first time it was explained to me, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I just kept thinking 4 is twice the size of 2, but I didn't realize that when you double the size, it's actually 4 of these guys. So if we're talking about raw file size, a 4K is far more expensive than 2 2K maps. In a real game, this gets a little bit more complicated. What if you have a model that has the same texture as something else in the scene and it's less draw calls overall? Stuff like that kind of muddies it up. But if we're talking about a single prop, I would probably opt for 2 2K maps rather than 1 4K map, in the sense that it'll be a little bit cheaper. And that's why you sometimes see an ArtStation, when people make weapons and stuff like that, they'll have 2 or 3 2K maps or something like that. Rather than just bumping it right up to a 4K. So there are reasons for it. It's going to save you a little bit of space in your RAM, but we're going to be going for, like I said, 2 different maps. And the way that I've kind of broken this up and separated it is on the bottom here, we have everything that has to do with the keys, as well as things with really big text on it. So the keys, of course, are going to be all this stuff down here, the keycaps, this inner stuff here, everything on the inside that's attached to the keys. But then I also threw in this back plate where it says Underwood, as well as the ruler pieces. And the reason I did that is because just because there's less stuff here, we're gonna have a little bit more resolution on this one. And I kind of want things with big text on it to be a little bit more clear and a little bit more crisp. Now, of course, there's also text on other parts of this model. Like if I go back here, we have some text here. We have text on the back, but it's a lot less prevalent, and we could probably get away with even not putting it on there. I just want to make sure things like the ruler and any of these letters and this stuff back here that you're like expecting or looking for is as clear as possible. So that's how I decided to split up these two guys. Now, when we're trying to pack this stuff, the easiest way to do it is to just select all the UVs and then go to, select all the UVs, go to modify and layout. And we'll just do this. This isn't exactly how we're gonna go about doing it, but you can see in the bottom left, there's a bar that's sort of showing our progress. It's finding a way to sort of compact everything as tightly as possible into the one-to-one space. And this is good for some things, bad for some other things. We're gonna undo this in a second, but I just kind of wanted to show you exactly how it's gonna go about doing it. On top of that, there are some sort of ways that we can adjust it. We have it's a window that's kind of on my other monitor, so I'll show you in a second, but it lets us kind of specify a little bit more different ways we can get better packing results, and I'll go over that in just a moment, but let's just wait for this to load out. All right, so if we zoom in, we can see that it's essentially packed this in way better than we'd ever manually be able to do this. Like, this is pretty incredibly tightly packed. And it's obviously, like, if you were to do this by hand, it would take you probably all day. But there are a few problems with it. So what I'm going to do is hit Control Z and undo that. The first thing I want to point out is that we have this right here. So what this is representing is the top of the keys, right? So I have this at the very end. I went back and I projected this from Y, and what this is essentially doing is saying, like, this is exactly how our keys are laid out. Like, I know this is where Q, W, E, R, etc. is laid out. And this is going to help a lot when we're actually texturing. We're going to know exactly where this stuff is, and we can be a lot quicker and more precise with when we actually have to put the letters on the keyboard. So I want it to stay like this in the UV editor itself. And in order to do that, we're going to have to more or less kind of trick the UV packing system into sort of making a space for that. Now, there's a couple ways that we can do this. And the way that I'm going to do it is by making a new shape, create polygon primitives, cube. And this is like a totally optional step, but I think it's going to save you a ton of time down the road. And actually, we probably only need a plane here. And what I'm going to do is just roughly make the same size as these keys here. Something like that will do. I'm going to planar project it from Y. And you guys might see what I'm doing here. And then if I select everything again, we have our UV editor with everything popping up. I'm gonna have to shrink this all down. Let's go ahead and I'm copying the textile density from this and pasting it here. You can just scale this until the checkers are the same size when you click the checker texture. But what I want to do is sort of make a shell here that's about the same size that I can then pack, excluding these guys, and then replace these guys in after the fact, so I know there's an actual spot for it in the UV editor after I've packed everything, and this can keep the same shape. So how I'm going to do this is go back to this this face here. I'm going to start by sort of positioning it so it's right as tight as it can be, like this. And I'm going to start tweaking it a little bit. So I'm going to double click our move tools, and what we can do is go to preserve UVs. Now what this is going to do is make it so that, say we move something here, the UVs are going to follow along with it. And just to make this a bit easier to visualize, I'm going to flip this around. And you might be able to see where I'm going with this. So I kind of just want to or was it not? Maybe it wasn't backwards actually. What I want to do is okay, it was backwards? I don't know. I kind of want to just have preserve UVs on and just kind of scoot this in so it's as tight as possible. And we can just kind of trick the whole system by doing this. So that's pretty good. We can take it a little bit further by like grabbing certain vertices and pulling this in. We can add some cuts to it. We don't really have to worry about any of the geometry with this because this is like completely temporary, right? So let's add in several cuts. One. It's lagging quite a bit, that's what's going on. Okay, so now that we have those guys in place, and maybe we'll put a few horizontal ones. Yeah, this is mega leggy. We can just sort of manipulate things here. I'm going to go into vertex mode. I think, yeah, that should be compatible with both. And then just tighten this up like so. Grab this one. Pull it down. Pull that down. I'm just kind of trying to shrink wrap this as best as I can. It's definitely not perfect. Okay, we can tuck this guy in here. Like every little bit's gonna help, right? Pull that in. We might have to add a few more edges. Just to squeeze out a little bit more space. So I'm gonna go back to our cut tool, just add in 2 edges here and here. Can pull this down. Okay, that side seems pretty good. And then as for this side, something along these lines. Yeah, so that's shrink wrapped around it pretty good. So yeah, we can select all of this now. We can use this guy as kind of like a substitute. And let's just make this full screen for now. I'm going to put these guys to the side. We're not going to be including it just yet, but we can select all of this, or rather select all the UVs. Go to modify and layout. I'm going to click this little option box. And from here, we can do our packing resolution. So what resolution are you going to be packing at? Like, what is your expected map size? I'm just going to do 4096, which is 4K. I'm just going to expect that I'm going to crank everything up to 4K when I do renders. Or it might just be safer to do 2048, because if I were to sort of share this online, people would probably want 2048 because that's a reasonable texture resolution for a model. Packing iterations, this is going to be how many times the process happens for it to pack. It can pack you know, as many times as you want, and then it sees which one has the least amount of space between things and it'll prioritize that one. So typically you want to crank that up to, I think, past 5 or definitely past 10. It doesn't really matter, and each time, like, it takes longer and longer the more you turn this up. Does it have the option to translate shells or rotate shells? I want it to be able to do both. From here you can say how much you want it to rotate by. It should always be a multiple of 90. You don't want it to sort of rotate so it has like angles after we work so hard to sort of iron that stuff out. Shell padding, how much padding we want between shells, how many pixels we want in between all the shells. 8 is normal. I think you can go about as low as 4 without seeing too much bleeding, but I think at 2048, 8 is good. If you go to 4K, you can lower it to 4 because there'll be more room between. That should be the pretty standard layout for this. Since we are laying out 5 times, it's going to take a while, and I kind of want to view progress on that bar, so I'm going to make sure we can see down there. But yeah, kind of have our substitute shell in there. Everything's in place. The only other thing to say is make sure that you've sort of, you know, gone over your model, selecting this stuff. Make sure, you know, everything's blue. There's no red or inverted faces or anything like that. You know, double check if there's any stretching. This is definitely stretching, but like it's reasonable. But yeah, just like look over everything, make sure it's good. You don't really want to have to go back and repack things, especially when you've already baked. So this is kind of a good final check for everything. But with that out of the way, I'm just going to sort of go ahead and hit apply. It's going to start doing its packing. And this will probably take a while, so I will talk to you guys in just a moment. Okay, so that did take quite a bit of time, but let's go ahead and check out how everything's looking. So, yeah, things are packed in here pretty tightly. We have a bit of a gap up here, but all things considered, like really good. Sorry, I'm just turning that stuff off. And then if we poke around, here we go. We have this guy here, which is our sort of substitute mesh. Let's go ahead and slot him out. We can then grab our good version. And then we should be able to shrink this down and fit it in. And it should just perfectly fit in there. I'm going to actually rotate this first. It seems like it's, since we had rotation turned on, it was upside down. This seems correct like that. So let's go ahead and put that guy back in. So yeah, it is going to be upside down, but at least it's consistent, right? We know exactly where it's going. And then even from here, I'm going to opt to space these guys out just a little bit more. Which, yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time, but just giving everyone a little bit of breathing room is definitely going to help with our bake. When we bake things, we don't want things being too close or touching, because if that's the case, We can get something called bleeding, where it's kind of like pixels that are too close, kind of the colors, well, bleed together, and it gives us some sort of skewed baking results. So I'm just going to spread these guys out a little bit more, but this way we can keep these guys in the orientation that we want, which is really, really useful. So give these all a little bit of room. This guy can go up here to allow this guy to move down. Do that. And yeah, I'll just speed this up because this part should be pretty self-explanatory. Okay, sweet. So that's that. Super tight pack, so I'm really happy with that. We can now go ahead and just straight up, well, delete that guy. We don't really need him at all anymore. And that's going to be our first sort of UV set. So what I'm going to do now is we can grab all of these guys and let's go ahead and isolate them. Let's give these guys their own group. So I'm going to select all of them and hit Control G. And we're going to call this, we're going to have to sort through all this eventually, which is going to be a bit crazy, but let's call this keys underscore low. So that's going to be the name of this group. It's all the keys and it's the low poly for it. And then we can make a new layer as well and call this keys low. I don't think it lets you do underscores here. And we'll make it blue. I usually associate blue with low poly. I think I mentioned that before, but I just kind of like that consistency. So now we can turn that off. And that leaves us with this stuff. So this stuff, we're going to do the same thing. What we can do is Control G, put this in a group, call this body low, add it to a group, or a layer this time, sorry, body low, add it all to that. So now we can just sort of switch between the two. And of course we can turn them both on. This is still the low poly, it's just for the fact that we have two different maps. It's an easy way to keep it organized. And we're going to do the same thing, but there's a bit of a catch with this one. So one thing that we haven't done any of throughout this entire process is UV stacking. We're going to want to have to stack some UVs here. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, the more texture space we have in our UV sheet, the higher the actual texture quality is going to be. So if we have things like, what's a good example? I suppose we could use the feet. The feet would be a great example. So I'm just going to select all these and see how they're all the exact same UV shell. What we could essentially do is pack just one of these like we did with the previous one, and then delete the rest, duplicate the packed one, place them all over, and then all of those legs will share the exact same texture. And then we can just rotate them all a little bit differently to have different results. But in doing so, we've saved 75% of the space that this would take up because 3/4 of it are gone, right? So the way that I kind of want to pack this is by selecting all of the unique stuff, moving it down. Sorry, I should probably put this on. Selecting all the unique stuff, putting it down, leaving all the duplicated stuff up here, and then we can pack all of it down here. And then it should be really easy to identify the duplicated stuff, and we can just delete the duplicated stuff, replace it with the version that's already packed, and then that way we can pretty quickly and pretty easily just duplicate that stuff, and the bake will be perfectly fine, and then we'll also have more texture space. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if we are going to be baking, we don't want to have multiple stuff stacked. So when we do end up deleting and duplicating this after we pack it all together, we're going to want to take those UV shells and move them over one spot. Now, if you don't understand exactly what I mean by this, I'll be showing you just as soon as we get through to it, but just keep that in mind if you're one who skips through the tutorial just to sort of find information quickly. That's something we're gonna have to do, and if you don't understand it completely, just stay tuned and we'll get to that. So yeah, let's start by identifying all the unique stuff that we for sure want to pack. So this is the main shell, we want that. The spacebar, we definitely want that. I'm just moving them down so it's easy to find. The sort of front chassis, we're gonna want that. This being kind of like the frame here, we definitely want that. It's really hard to do this with one monitor properly. Let me try and find an example of something we don't want to do. So here's an example. We have, if I isolate this, we have two of these, and we really don't need them to be separate textures because it's already hard enough to see them as it is. There's really no point. So what I'm going to do is, if I select it, it's still one object. So if I select one, the other is still going to be attached, but I just want to bring one of them down, and I'll put the one that we're going to duplicate somewhere in the corner just so we know we're not going to do that. And then what's going to happen is we're going to take this shell and we'll select it with all the stuff down here. We'll pack it in, and then we'll see all this stuff floating around, and if I select this, it's still corresponding with this one because it's the same object. And it'll be really easy to be like, hey, we can isolate this, delete the duplicated one, replace it with the one that's already packed, and sort of move on. So let's do some more examples. So this is the belt. This is going to be unique. This is this front bar, which of course is going to be unique. Let's go ahead and do those legs. Actually, that's a really good example. So I'm gonna put all of them up here except for one of them. I would probably opt for this one. I seem to favor this kind of camera angle here. So let's just grab that. Leave these guys up here, and see we're saving all this texture space theoretically because we're not using that. This big bar up here is obviously unique. And I guess I might as well just go through all of this. It'll definitely take some time, but I can understand how this could be a bit of an intimidating topic. So this is unique. It's just the one. This back thing is obviously unique. This guy here. This front piece is definitely unique. It's nice to be able to kind of recognize what you're doing when what you're working on just by seeing the UV shells. If I'm remembering this correctly, this is something we're duplicating. So this is these wheels here. The thing is, they're so visible. I don't know if I want to have them be separate. I think in this case specifically, just because these gigantic rings here are so obviously visible, I'm going to have both of them. That's an exception. It's just like if they were duplicated and you could see them like this, it'd be really, really obvious that they're the exact same. These guys though, let's take a look at what this is. So it's these guys here. You'll never notice if this is duplicated because it's so small, so I don't mind bringing this down. And hopefully this is making sense. Let's go ahead and select this. So this is this here that's then plugging into the side, so that's all unique. Let's go for some more duplicated stuff. So this is referring to this guy here. So that's not going to be something that you'll ever notice really being duplicated. So I'm going to bring one of these down, put one of these up. This here is the spring. The spring is unique. This guy right here, he's unique. So here's another double of something. If we take a look at it, it's this here. This we're not going to really ever see two at the same time perfectly, so I'm going to put one of them up here. This is, it's kind of hard to see with this UV setup. All on the same screen. This is this guy here, so he's unique. And I'm sure you guys get the point as far as what I'm doing. But like I said, just might as well go through it all. This guy is definitely unique. And with the other one, make sure you've checked everything on this, because this is kind of like assuming everything is good where you can move forward. So have your UVs be exactly how you want them to be. Make sure there's nothing that's red or inverted. Make sure there's no crazy stretching on anything. Let's take a look at these guys. So it's these sort of dome pieces. Going to leave one of them up here. Move one of them down. These are all, if I remember correctly, various tubes and bars, so they're all unique. Could probably stack some of them, but they're all varying, so I'm just going to make them different. These guys I know are unique. They are slightly different, and they have different information baking to them. Here are some interesting ones. So these are along here, so we definitely don't need two of them. It's hard enough to see them as it is. So I can put one of them up here, bring one of them down. We also have these guys, which are in the same place. So same treatment. Just make sure the shells that you're putting, or when you're splitting them up, that they're sort of cohesive. Like this is all of this one. Like I'm not grabbing this face and then like the ring from one down there or something like that. This guy, I'm gonna put him in the same category as the dome on top, where it's obvious enough to see all of this. And originally I wasn't gonna do this, like I was just gonna stack them. But now that I think about it, it's visible enough that I kind of want both of them to be their own unique space. Let's look here. So it's a series of these guys. So yeah, all of these we don't need. Saving. I mean, it's a small piece, but we're making it 75% smaller than it already is. And that, I mean, if we're doing that for a lot of pieces, it's going to stack up after a while, right? We still have quite a bit to go. What am I selecting here? These guys, they are unique. They don't seem like it, but they're varying in size. So I'll put that there. This stuff is the front bars, if I remember. Yeah, right here, which is unique. Here's some stuff that's stacking. It's going to be these guys. They're small, so I'm going to have them stack. And then if it's too obvious, I can just sort of like rotate one a little bit, and I'll just sort of cover that up a bit. So that should be fine. Here's some more stacking stuff. These guys here, they're at the back. They're both visible, but they're small. So once again, I really don't mind having them stack. And we can have a visual representation of all the space we're saving, which isn't a lot. And I'm sure we can push the stacking a lot further than we actually are. Like with a lot of game models, you'll see them like copy this over to here and like double up on this, which is really, really impressive. If I were to be honest, that is a gap in my knowledge, and I'm working on trying to improve that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that also a lot, if not most of people, would just make the frame unique. So I don't think I'm really pushing it by any means by doing something like that. These guys back here, once again, they're all visible at the same time, but they're all small, so I don't mind having them stack. So I'm gonna put these guys back here. This is this bar, of course, unique. Something really small. Of course, we can just isolate it to quickly see. These little wheels here, yeah, we can definitely stack these guys. We're not going to need both of them. This is some kind of bar down here. Some kind of cylinder, which is probably unique. Definitely unique, rather. This, once again, unique stuff. It's pretty easy to spot it. Like I've gone out of my way to group it all in a certain way so that it's really obvious if it's stacking stuff. Here's some stuff. It's rather large, but they're pretty far apart, so I'm going to go ahead and stack them. So I'm going to grab this side, put it up here, and then we can move this down. Once again, anything like this, it's a dead giveaway that it's stacked. This stuff, once again, it's far enough away, and based on my camera angles, I'll almost never be able to see both of them at the same time. So I'm going to grab one of them and move it up here. And if you haven't noticed, what I'm trying to do is keep all the unique stuff on one side, so it's just easier to keep track of. Like I'm keeping all the stuff on the left and everything on the right. I'm going to be making the duplicate just so it's easier to keep track of. This stuff I know is a duplicate contender, these sort of gears here. Put this down. This is definitely unique. Definitely unique. And we're definitely getting there as well. This is, what is this? Another spring. Okay, that makes sense. Springs were definitely a weird one to go through in UV. And once again, I think I explained this in the last part. It was a couple of weeks ago when I recorded that last part. But yeah, I just opted to not record it because having my UV layout set up like it is right now just sort of slows things down by quite a bit. As you can imagine, I would prefer to sort of utilize my full setup the way that it was kind of designed and intended to be. So let's see if we have more duplicating stuff. Yeah, so this should be under the keyboard, so that's obviously not going to be too important to save a lot of texture space on. I'd be surprised if anyone even seize under the model for too long to notice that. This stuff is unique. Unique and unique, it seems like. Let's take a look at this stuff. Okay, these guys in here, right, so this is the right side, which I'm making the duplicate and keeping the left side. This looks unique. I believe this is a hook. Yep. Oh man, it is definitely relieving to know that I'm getting near the end of this. This is such a dense mesh. I seriously underestimated how long this was going to take me. But I'm very, very proud with how it's coming out, and I'm very happy with the results. All this stuff looks unique, so I'm just going to grab it all at once. I'm just going to go scout for unique stuff. Unique, unique, unique. All this is unique. 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 What is this? These guys here. I think they are slightly different. So I'm gonna... No, we just gotta grab all the unique stuff first. All this and this. There's not too much unique stuff left, but we can move that down, and I think everything else might actually be duplicates. Let's take a look. All right, so this guy can put up here. Move the good one down here. And this only works because these guys are the exact same, right? If there was slight differences between them, it would be a different story. This tiny piece obviously doesn't have to be unique if we have an exact copy of it. This stuff, just because of their position and they add a lot of like difference, I'm gonna make all these unique. I kind of like that idea. Just like they're easily identifiable, I find my eyes always sort of going towards them just based on the spacing and the color difference. That's just a preference. You could stack that if you really wanted to. These guys, it's hard to say. Like, this is another like personal preference. Like, would you make this unique or not? I'm gonna make it unique because they're kind of like the face of the typewriter and they're right in front of you. These two guys are down here. We definitely don't need to make them unique. They're kind of hidden away. You'll never see two of them at the same time. Okay, what are we working with here? These two guys, yeah, same logic. I'm going to want them to have slightly different textures. As for these two, yeah, same thing. There's too many angles where you see them right beside each other. It's very obvious. This stuff, if I remember correctly, is tucked away in here, so I'm going to stack them. This is unique, actually. This is also unique. So we're pretty much done. Let's just keep at this pace. what is this? These guys here, right. They're so hidden. I'm going to actually, I don't want to waste the texture space. Even if it is tiny, let's just have them be the same and rotate them slightly. This is unique. These are, yeah, I already agreed to just sort of put these guys here. And then the last two are, right, they're the cylinders that go in here. Yeah, these are overkill. We don't really care if they're showing texture. So yeah, I'm gonna put this down here. So this is all the space we're saving up here, which in hindsight isn't a lot compared to this, but it's enough to make a difference. And I can guarantee, I'm gonna go ahead and save. I can guarantee that you would notice somewhat of a difference if I kept this in, if I didn't keep this in, as far as like how fuzzy or sharp it is. So what we can do now is, so I saved just in case, but what we can do is go ahead and grab this, modify, layout, same settings as before, and now we're going to lay this stuff out in here. And let's go ahead and go through with that. It's going to take quite a while again. I think the last one took like, who knows, maybe like 10-15 minutes. And yeah, I'll catch you guys as soon as this is done. Okay, so now we have this guy packed, as you can see, just kind of like the other one, super tight. One thing that we can do to actually see how tight it is I'm not sure if we have to select the UVs for this, but we can go to View, Heads Up Display, UV Statistics, and make sure percentage of UV space is used. For some reason, you always have to hit Apply to see it update. But if you hit Apply, 100% of UV space used. That's kind of, well, there's gaps, but I guess it's saying it's about as optimized as it could possibly be. So that's always a good sign. I was going to say anything above like 80 is good, but sure, 100. I will gladly take 100. Yeah, so that's going to do that. Now, I'm going to have to kind of show a few examples as to what I meant about this stacking thing. So let's say we want to start working on it and we select all of this. We have some stuff up here. So let's go to the feet as an example. I can select this foot. I'm going to say, hey, where is this in the model? Oh, it's right here. I can go to object mode, select it. And now in the UV editor, we see two things. We see all these extras up here and this good version here. So let's make sure we know which one the good version is. And we see the good version is this guy here. We can then take the duplicate versions. We can extract those faces because we don't need them. We have the good version where the UVs are in the 1-to-1. Let's go ahead and center our pivot on this guy. And we can duplicate this one around. And I'm going to turn on wireframe for this. And just sort of snap it so it's perfectly in place with everything. We're going to want it to stay pretty accurate, so it seems that this one has been rotated a bit. So essentially I'm just making a duplicate of the one with the good UVs, putting it on top of the rest of them. And then what we can do is, let's just sort of change our view so it's easier to do this. I'm going to select all the feet, and we can select all of these guys. It's kind of hard to explain with the UVs like this, UV windows like this. But essentially anything that has the UVs in the old spot, we just don't really need them. So I'm going to go ahead and delete. So that one was always good. And then that one there. So let me grab all these feet again. If we go back to our UV editor, even though we have all 4 feet selected, it's just these 1 shells here. So we can go back to our main view, all the feet selected, all the UVs stacked perfectly on top of each other. And one of the things that I brought up before was we can't bake this way. We can't bake with all of the feet like this. And the reason that is because if you have a bunch of shells on top of each other and you're baking, it's trying to project information from multiple different objects in multiple different directions, and this stuff is directly on top of each other, and it's going to cause some weird artifacting. So what I choose to do is we determine that this foot is kind of like the main one. So I'm going to select all the other feet, and we can go to transform, hit this arrow here. Well, I guess we have to select the shells first. Hit this arrow here, and it's going to move them all over 1 UV space. So we have the good one and this one in the exact same spot, just 1 shell over. And if you know anything about how UV mapping works, things tile. So whatever texture we apply here, it's going to be the exact same here, the exact same here, the exact same here, the exact same here. So even though this is 1 space over, it's going to pick up the exact information that's right here without interfering with our bake. Our bake is not going to be affected because this is not directly on top of this. It's moved over. It's going to give us the same visual results without affecting our bake whatsoever. So that's how I'm going to go about doing this kind of like cleanup with the stacking. So we kind of have to go through that and do it for all the stuff up here. I'll do a few more examples, and then I'll do the rest of it kind of like off camera, since I think it should be easy enough after a few examples to pick up on. So I'll select this stuff. I don't really know where it is in here, so I'll select this stuff and be like, oh, it's this model here. So I can now select this. We can isolate it. Pretty simple. We can go ahead and grab this guy, and this is our good version with the UVs kind of all spread out. Like there's no way we're going to replicate this just by trying to snap things. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to use our nifty smart duplicate face tool. I'm going to freeze transform, delete history on this guy, center pivot. We're going to scale him -1, so we flip it. We're going to move our pivot and snap it in place. We can then try to grab the imposter one. So this guy here who was attached to the original, who has his UVs up here, we can go ahead and delete. We can now mesh combine these guys. Make sure we keep it in the body low group. And now their UVs are in the exact same spot. And just like before, we're going to grab all of them from this guy. We're going to move them over 1 space like so. And the thing is, if I turn on, where is it? This here, you're going to notice that this guy is purple now. We want him to be blue, right? But essentially what it's trying to say is like, hey, this is out of the 1-to-1 space. It should even be red because it's technically flipped, right? Like this is not correct traditionally, but since this is an exact copy of this, this is what we're actually baking our information to. It's okay that this is flipped because it's just duplicating what's going on here. It's just mirrored over. This doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter if this is flipped or not flipped. And in this case, it happens to be flipped, and we're okay with that. As long as the UVs are the exact same and 1 over, we're good to sort of move forward. So that's that one. Also, when you do merge multiple objects together and it makes a new one, what's going to happen is it's going to kick it out of its original group. So I'm just going to drag this with the middle mouse back into body low. Yeah, so we can continue and do maybe 2 more examples. Let's take a look at this guy here, which is this. Let's go ahead and isolate it. So if I select these UVs, or those faces, they're going to correspond with these UVs scattered all over in the 1-to-1 space. We can go ahead and smart duplicate, center pivot, freeze transform, delete history, whatever you got to do. We can move the pivot here, snap him over, and then go in and delete the one with the bad UVs. Mesh combine these guys, add them to the body low again, put it back in the group, and then final step, grab these faces from the new one and push them over one spot. Nice. So let's just do one last example. Select everything. Our next example is this. This happens to be this guy here. Let's go into object mode, select this. This one we're not going to have to mirror over. So I'm glad we got examples of some that we mirror over, some that we don't. Yeah, so what we can do once again, it's starting to get repetitive, right? We can, whoa. Sorry, we got this new one that we smart duplicated. We can move them over. I think at some point I turned on grid snapping by accident. Let me just turn that off. There we go. Can just sort of move my pivot somewhere where it'll snap. Oh, I guess we did mirror this guy over actually. So scale him -1. Or we didn't. Something weird is going on with the snapping. I'm going to delete that guy. Let's try that again. So smart duplicate. Let's just try and go -1. So yeah, it's not going to be exact. Smart duplicate, center pivot, freeze transform, delete history. It seems like this is just rotated. At some point I must have done that. So let's just sort of center this guy as best as we can. And then we can go ahead and delete the original with the bad UVs, of course. Mesh, combine, add back to the group and the layer. Go back to the UVs for it. Select the duplicated version and move it over a group. So I'm just going to go through and do all of this for everything. As you can see, we're starting to get a lot of stuff over here. This is, of course, going to correspond with the exact same position on the right side. And yeah, I'm just going to go through and do that for all this stuff here. I want to do that off of camera because it's getting repetitive. I think that should be enough examples, but with that done, we're going to be ready for baking. So that's going to be how we finish off our UVs. And I guess this was the low poly and UV section. So this is how we finish off our low poly and our UVs. And yeah, that's going to do it for this entire section, this entire sort of chapter of the tutorial. So the next phase is going to be baking. Baking will be a pretty quick one, fun one too. We're going to start to really see the final results of our model more or less. But yeah, I'm going to go through with this, and then I'm going to record the sort of recap chapter episode for this, and then we're going to dive into baking. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you learned something. This was definitely a lot to take in at once. I think this chapter was one of the more technical ones, and the next one will be kind of within the same vein, but then we're going to get our artistic flair going on in the texturing very, very soon. So only a few baking ones. I can't imagine it's going to be too long, and then we're diving into some of the really good juicy stuff. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next major section when we start baking our model. See ya.